Lately, there's been interesting topics circulating among many players regarding who the current Hydro Archon actually is. Some speculate that Nuvilet is the current Hydro Archon, while others defend Furina. So which one is correct? Both sides have their own arguments, and I think they can all be considered good enough. So what should be done about this? Well, because the discussion about the Archon topic is heating up, let's not just talk about Hydro Archon but also about the Archon title itself. I will approach this from two angles. First, commenting on the current situation of Hydro Archon, and then connecting it to the title of Archon in general. Sounds good? Alright, let's begin. I personally wonder why so many players support Nuvilet to be the Hydro Archon. We will find various arguments about this, starting from the similarity of Traveler's Kit with the Archons, glowing hair, power level, and so on. I have seen this argument and some of them are quite convincing, while others seem forced. The two main points that stand out are Traveler's Kit and the glowing hair or body part. For the Traveler's Kit, the logic goes like this. Based on the existing pattern, the Traveler has skills parallel to the skills or bursts of the Archon. And because the Hydro Traveler skill parallel to Nuvilet's skill, many assume that Nuvilet could be the Hydro Archon. However, in my opinion, this argument is too weak due to its inconsistency and seems forced. The issue is that the Electro Traveler skill is not similar at all to Raiden Shogun or A skill or burst. Some add that the focus should not be on the skill or burst, but on the mechanics. If that is the case, characters other than the Traveler would be more suitable, such as Visual, an Electro battery that is much better than the Traveler. You see, over time, this argument might feel too forced. This is because the statement itself is unclear. What does parallel or similarity mean? Is it based on appearance, mechanics, or what? Furthermore, Traveler's Kit might be closer to the dragons rather than the Archons. I will not discuss those similarities in this video because our focus is on Archonhood right now. So yeah. The second point is the glowing hair or glowing body parts. As you know, so far all four Archons share a common uniqueness. Their hair or some part of their body glows during and after performing their bursts. This uniqueness is then applied to Nuvilet, which surprisingly fits. Nuvilet's hair or body part glows during and after his burst. Now, because of this, many players immediately concluded that this definitely proves that Nuvilet is the Hydro Archon. This second argument seems quite strong, and yes, I acknowledge that. However, there is still a gap. The biggest gap in this argument is the lack of official confirmation on whether glowing hair or body parts indicate their Archon status. There is another explanation for it, such as glowing hair indicating that the entity is channeling elemental powers from their body since they don't have a vision, or showing that they are pure elemental entities with immense power, visible through their glowing hair. So yeah, Archon status isn't the only explanation for that phenomenon. On top of that, because Nuvilet has been confirmed as the successor of the Hydro Dragon, and dragons can be categorized as elemental entities with abundant power, so it is reasonable for his hair to glow. And for consideration, isn't granting Archon status to the dragon considered to be a blasphemy? Because we know that dragons do not like Celestia and the Archons. Wouldn't it be strange if they suddenly agreed to that? Okay, aside from the previous two arguments and some complicated matters, if we investigate together, the reason is quite simple. Nuvilet can be seen as a reliable character, while also embodying an ideal depiction, a perfect image in the eyes of players. If we delve deeper, we will find that Genshin Impact players actually long for the existence of an ideal leader, an admired figure, because upon reflection, the other Archons can't really be considered ideal in the eyes of mainstream players. Well, some of us might say that Nahida is a good leader, but for many players, Nahida still appears as a child and doesn't showcase noticeable power. so her aura of ability isn't strong enough. Now, if we compare with other Archons, well, as you know, they all have flaws or embarrassing side, like Zhongli lacks of Mora and his retirement, Venti's alcohol addiction, and Ace, well, you know. So what I want to convey is that the mental image players have of Archon is actually quite stereotypical. A leader, be it male or female, with a few embarrassing or flawed traits, appearing firm, gentle, authoritative, rational, and much more, essentially needing to approach the world perfect. And luckily enough, the storyline in Fontaine so far and Nouvillette's character align with this idealized depiction and the player's longing. So it can't be denied that many of us support this theory. In short, Nouvillette as an Archon theory doesn't solely focus on the Archon aspect, but rather on players yearning for an ideal leader or figure. What further complicated the situation is Furina's personality, which can be said isn't very well liked. Why? Because I assume initially, before Fontaine's release, many of us had high expectation that the current Hydro Archon would be intelligent, adept at manipulating laws, and her confidence would have strong reason behind it. However, unfortunately, when we met Furina directly for the first time, there was a mismatch between our expectation and what Hoyo first presented. So it is understandable that many of us felt disappointed. So that is my take on the Hydro Archon situation. I conclude that Nouvillette Archon theory is indeed intriguing, but it doesn't align well with the narrative that has been built up until now. Does this indicate that Furina is the Hydro Archon? Well, let's take a step back and question something simpler for a moment, shall we? What is even an Archon? I think we can all agree that the term Archon is merely a title or status. The problem lies in the lack of agreed definition. What is even worse is that many of us incorporate our personal ideas into the definition of Archon. Some believe that Archon should only be someone who is stronger, while others think it should be someone authoritative and intelligent and so on. But is that really the case? In fact, based on the information we have gathered so far, the status of Archon is considered new. It was implemented after the Archon War, a period when Celestia opened the door to promotion for divine beings on Teyvat. So before the Archon War, and even in early history, there was no such thing as Archon. As mentioned earlier, the status of Archon emerged after the Archon War, indicating that this status was a reward for the winners of that event. Therefore, the original definition of Archon is a status given to divine beings who successfully won the Archon War. Won in this context means they are the only divine beings who survive or participate or not resign from the Archon War event. In this definition, I don't include the Genosis because if you observe, Celestia actually provide two kinds of rewards, non-physical in the form of status and physical in the form of Genosis. So from this perspective, Archon and Genosis are two distinct things. Here's an analogy. Imagine a chess player named John. John won an international chess championship. He automatically received two prizes, the status of the world's best chess player and a trophy as proof of his victory. Let's say it is not a rotating trophy, okay? The question is, if he loses his status, does his trophy disappear too? No, because these two things aren't inherently linked from the start. The same goes the other way around. So, from this analogy, even if an Archon loses their Genosis, their status as Archon will remain until the next Archon War, which would not happen. The drawback is that they no longer have a physical proof of their victory. If we apply this, Venti and Zhongli, despite losing their Genosis, by definition, are still Archon. Now, what about A, Nahida, Furina, and the others? If we follow the previous definition, they do not hold the true Archon status, meaning they weren't involved in the Archon War. So what should we do then? Well, we need to find the second definition. To find this second definition, we have to look at what A, Nahida, and Furina have in common. Do you know what that is? Simply put, they all are successor. A successor means someone who obtained a title, status, or position after someone else, in this context, chosen by the previous person, whether directly or considering their lineage. From this, we can conclude that the status of Archon can be passed down to the entity chosen by the previous holder. Because the term of entity here has a broad scope, it is not limited to divine beings alone, but could also include ordinary humans, vision user, and even the dragons themselves, depending on the situation. This opens the possibility of an Archon successor not possessing divine power. For instance, someone like Furina, who so far doesn't exhibit much divinity. So in the end, we have arrived at two definitions of Archon, a status given to the winner of the Archon War, and an entity chosen by the previous holder. Returning to our initial discussion, is Neuvillette the Hydro Archon? Based on the definition we have established, the answer is no. Neuvillette didn't participate in, let alone win the Archon War, and he wasn't chosen as the successor by Egeria, the former Hydro Archon. And Furina of Fossalor, based on the previous definition, is indeed the current Hydro Archon. Egeria chose her as the successor and tasked her with saving Fontaine from the prophecy. Is it clear now? I also hope this definition of Archon holds true. For the closing, there is one thing I want to address. After all that we have learned in the Fontaine arc, including the War Quest, what if? All of this is actually to show us that title, status, or names including Archon don't mean anything at all. The most important thing is not the name or status, but the essence. This implicitly shows us how little we understand about Teyvat, even though we have been here for 3 years. At the end, this discussion and debate ultimately just reveal our selfishness toward a certain character, seeking validation for those characters to have other values. Okay, I think that is enough for today. Thank you for watching. Hello Zen here, stay safe and see you next time.